Obama and the State of the Union, the president's theme, a year of action. But what about last year or 2012 or 2011? Why weren't those years of action for Obama? It seems like Obamacare has created plenty of action, none of it good. In the State of the Union, one of the bigger themes was increasing the minimum wage and so-called income inequality. The president wants to increase the minimum wage for federal contract workers from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour. That would be for future contracts, future workers, not current contract employees. Truth is, most federal contract workers already make more than the minimum wage, way more.
In the coming weeks, I will issue an executive order requiring federal contractors to pay their federally funded employees a fair wage of at least $10.10 an hour, because if you cook our troops' meals or wash their dishes, you should not have to live in poverty. Of course, to reach millions more, Congress does need to get on board.
The president is urging Congress to jack up the minimum wage nationwide. First of all, this is a state issue. Second, raising the minimum wage kills jobs. And third, in a free society, there will always be income inequality. It is a necessary byproduct of the free markets. So how can this president be so far off base, so economically illiterate? Joining me now from Washington, D.C., president of the Market Institute, Charlie Sauer. Charlie, it's amazing to me when I hear the president go up there like at the State of the Union or any other speech that he gives, talk about these economic issues when we know that he has zero background in the free market, has never run so much as a popsicle stand, yet he's telling people, he's telling private businesses, hey, you need to pay your workers more.
Well, it's obvious he's never signed the front of a paycheck. But I mean, Graham, he's more than willing to lead with your money. And mind you, he said in there, he goes, I'm taking the lead on this. I hope you will all follow me. And I hope business owners from across the country follow me. In fact, his guest that he had up in the top, the CEO, I believe, of Punch Pizza, had recently raised his employee salary to $10 an hour, which is still under what the president is raising his minimum wage to of $10.10. And if this idea is so good, and why didn't the president do it, as you said, in 2012 or 2011? He could have done this a long time ago with just the stroke of his pen. But no, this is really just rhetoric. And as far as the minimum wage being a state issue, I would agree with you. But the interesting thing about the minimum wage to me is it passed, I believe it was 1935 when it first passed. And the argument to pass it at the time wasn't about raising the standard of living, which we know economically doesn't work. It was about the fact that Southern truck drivers weren't charging enough for the northern senators. So they passed the minimum wage, which brought the Southern truck drivers and forced them to charge a higher rate so that they were evened out with competition with the Northern truck drivers. I mean, this is a policy that has never had a good footing in theology, ideology, or economics.
That's interesting. I never knew that about the 1935 beginning of the minimum wage. But I had a federal contract, very, very small one, for a short period of time. It was for photography. And from time to time, I would hire contract workers, if you will, to work for me, underneath me. And if I was suddenly forced to pay them a minimum wage, I would probably, instead of hiring two guys, I would probably just hire one because I couldn't afford that minimum wage. So, you know, this is a job killer. And this is the thing that drives me crazy about these people.
Well, in economics terms, it's a marginal value. And so it's how much do you get out of that employee? And there's a reason why low-income workers are usually unskilled young workers. And that's if you really want to help out entrepreneurship and you want to support youth and grow the future of our economy, you really don't want to have any minimum wage. I think the New York Times had an article about this in the 1950s saying $0 is the right minimum wage.
Right.
But the fact is you're right. If an employee doesn't produce $7 an hour, or doesn't produce $10 an hour, you just don't hire them. And with the increased cost that Obamacare puts onto employers, and they don't need any more cost. What this does is just lowers the amount of people that they'll hire. It lowers the amount of people in the workforce. But, we have the lowest workforce participation rate, I believe, since 1978. And this just is going to keep driving that further down. But, I guess that's what President Obama wants. And
the minimum wage discriminates against unskilled workers. But let's move on to another subject that the president touched on, immigration, although he didn't spend a heck of a lot of time on immigration during the address.
Yeah, immigration has been a big deal on Capitol Hill all Congress long. But in the State of the Union, this was a really interesting State of the Union. Every time he did facts, you could tell that he just put them in a row because the facts didn't really jive with reality this year. But immigration was an issue that he just breezed over. This has been something the president has talked about year after year. But the House is on the verge of acting, and they've been talking about what they're going to do. And he thinks that they're going to act in the next couple of weeks. So he didn't want to poke the tiger on that one. Right. So he just mentioned, I support immigration reform, and moved right on.
Now, we have a clip from the State of the Union on immigration. Roll tape.
When people come here to fulfill their dreams, to study, invent, contribute to our culture, they make our country a more attractive place for businesses to locate and create jobs for everybody. So let's get immigration reform done this year. Let's get it done. It's time.
It's preposterous, the notion that the president talks about, that allowing 10, 20, maybe 30 million illegal immigrants who are unskilled into this country would help the economy.
I don't know. That's where you and I disagree on this issue. I think the economics are pretty straightforward on this. What would hurt the economy is trying to take the 20 or 30 million illegal immigrants. This is laws that should have never been in place. We should just be calling them immigrants. But in finding buses to send them back home, bus drivers might make a lot of money, but the taxpayers that have to pay for that system would lose money. And that's just a way of explaining that a lot of money would come out of the economy just to do this. But I work with investors and entrepreneurs all the time, and there's stories all of the time of entrepreneurs that come here and they want to stay. They're working with people, but their visas run out and we send them back home. There's stories all the time of entrepreneurs in college that want to stay here and we send them back home. There's something that needs to be done on the immigration. And, you might be right and I might be right, but I know that there's some place in between us that is at least a solution we can come to now.
Well, the bottom line is come here legally, whether you have a visa or you green card or you use the system, but just don't break and violate our laws. The very first move coming into our country. That's the way I look at it. Charlie, thank you. Coming up next, the politics of security at the Winter Olympics as the Daily Ledger continues.